Tennessee already picked up another commit for the class of 2025, their 10th of the class earlier this week. How good can this class be? I think it could be one of the better ones in college football, but where does that stack up in the Southeastern Conference? We'll talk Tennessee recruiting and more here on a Thursday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, good Thursday morning, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Vols. I am your host, Eric Kane. Appreciate you guys for being here. And as always, making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch each and every single day, because most of you guys are everydayers, and I can't thank you enough. Can't thank you for being everydayers, for making this show what it is. And we got a fun-filled show coming up. A couple of really good guests. We got the insider of all insiders for Tennessee athletics, specifically Tennessee recruiting. That's Austin Price, my colleague over at Volquest.com. He's going to join the show to talk about Tennessee's recruiting commitment from earlier this week and where this class stands now, both in the trenches and in the skill positions. We'll welcome back Max Chadwick of Pro Football Focus as he is continuing to pump the hype train essentially on James Pearce and his outlook for the 2024 season and 2025 NFL draft. And then a really interesting article I stumbled across earlier this week from CBS Sports, inside the college football NIL markets. A lot of you guys have always asked, what does this market look like? How much are players being paid? A really good article we're going to kind of go over here in segment 3 on a Thursday show. You can always watch, listen to us, subscribe to us, download us wherever you get your podcasts, and of course, on Locked On Vols on the YouTube channel. Currently, I am in Hoover, Alabama. I am pre-recording this Thursday episode because I'm going to be busy covering Tennessee baseball this week. But of course, anything news breaking-wise, specifically NCAA transfer portal-wise, I will get to on tomorrow's show. I can promise you that. All right, and finally, a big shout-out to FanDuel for making every moment more by visiting FanDuel.com/lockedon, where you can win $150 in bonus bets. Big shout out to FanDuel Sportsbook. So without further ado, let's jump down into it. Austin Price is going to talk about this Tennessee football recruiting class and the recruiting commitment of Antoni Ogumoro earlier this week. Here's Austin Price. Austin, Tennessee picks up its 10th commit earlier this week, and interior offensive lineman, a 4-star in Antoni Ogumoro. What can you tell us about this commitment for Tennessee, and what are the Vols like about this new commitment?
A kid that plays with a lot of ferociousness for an interior offensive lineman and has an incredible skill set from an athletic standpoint. Kid can really move. I really like, this pickup. I love his film. He plays nasty. This Tennessee needed like 2 to 3 interior guys in this class because they lose a lot, right? I mean, on the interior of the offensive line to graduation and such after this coming season. So to get Antoni is a big get. Now their attentions will turn to Jacoby Ward, to Nick Moore, native of Jefferson County, much like yourself, and Tennessee would love to add those two to Antoni Ogumoro, who again, the more I watch this film, the more I'm like, man, this kid is just filling it out. And Tennessee, I don't know for sure. I don't know this for sure, but I believe Antoni to be Tennessee's first ever player from Micronesia. So we've got Polynesians, now we have Micronesians in Tennessee. And for the people that don't know what Micronesia is, it's a chain of islands right off the coast of Guam, which is, I believe, further west than Hawaii.
Well, you have made your way out there to, at least to Hawaii, so you might know better than I do in that regard. Beats out, he lives in Oklahoma, beats out the home state Sooners, Oklahoma State, I believe Kansas State was in there. Why was it Tennessee in your conversations with him?
Well, I've seen, several people, whether it be fans or even Oklahoma reporters, talk about, don't want to go too far from home, but he's not really from Oklahoma. He just moved there in January. I mean, it's not like he has these deep roots there. Was in North Carolina before that, and again from the islands originally. So Tennessee did a fantastic job of recruiting him, but more so his family. He's got a younger brother, Troy, who's a special needs young man who Tennessee did a great job of bringing in specialists to help with Troy on the visit, which allowed his parents to kind of go through the visit with Antoni. Most of these other schools, the parents were tasked with Troy and having to manage him, and because of that, they couldn't see certain aspects of the visit. Well, Tennessee had specialists in. So Antoni, was able to go on the visit with his mom and dad. Troy was well taken care of. They didn't have to worry about anything. They loved everything about that visit that Tennessee did. And I think that's just something that set Tennessee above everybody else for how they treated the entire family. If you get on the kid's Instagram account, he kind of has a videographer following him around for every visit. And if you watch the Tennessee one, his dad is kneeling and he's looking around and he's sobbing, And so, like, if you really are paying attention, and again, I get why some people wouldn't be, but if you're paying attention to that, that Tennessee had a little something extra special for how they treated him, for how they felt on that visit. And truthfully, he's been locked in with the Vols for a few weeks now, but still took the visits to Kansas State and Missouri. And, because as he said, part of our culture is you live up to your word. I told those schools I would give them a fair shot. I gave them a fair shot, but it always came back to Tennessee for him. And Tennessee just did a nice job.
Yeah, you mentioned the OVs to Kansas State, to Missouri, Oklahoma, and to Tennessee. These have happened here this spring. It feels like, at least for Antoni, that the timeline was, I want to get something done by summer and then just kind of put all my focus on my senior season.
Yeah, and again, just moved up to Oklahoma, wants to be able to focus on that, had a chance to catch up with his high school coach out there, and he said that, tremendous feet, athleticism, much more violent at the point of attack than they even thought. They just got to watch him the last week or two in spring ball for the first time as far as on the field. And so, again, this is a guy that Tennessee feels like they kind of got out ahead of some teams on with how they recruited him and his family. And, it proves to be pivotal as they land a really nice, solid interior offensive lineman.
First offensive line commit for the class. Again, as you mentioned, interior, all the talk's always been on the offensive tackle position.
Yeah.
Jalen Matthews, David Sanders, Josh Petty, who can play a little bit of both tackle, interior. But you brought up a name in Nick Moore, Jefferson County, and some other options there in the interior. And this kind of goes to a deeper question, if you will. Cooper Mays has been injured a couple of years. He's been at Tennessee, and whenever he's out of the lineup, Tennessee's been really in desperation mode to have somebody who can snap the ball in this offense, just showing how critical he is in this center position is in the offense. Trying to find that center for when Cooper leaves for 2025. That's an ongoing discussion right now. You don't typically recruit centers per se. You kind of transition them from tackles or guards to centers. Nick Moore and some other options, even Antoni. Snapping the football, is that a thought for Tennessee and trying to recruit these guys, saying, all right, well, Cooper's going to be leaving here soon. We need some stability at the center position.
It's definitely a thought when it comes to Nick Moore. And I think the fact that he played for an old center and Spencer Riley helps. I think that, Nick's one that's very open to the possibility of snapping the football. Not what he's going to do at Jefferson County because they need him in other areas, but definitely one that's athletic enough. Kind of honestly, it seems right around Cooper's size. I mean, 6'2"-ish, almost 6'3". Cooper was a really dominant defensive lineman when he wanted to be at Catholic. Nick Moore, really dominant defensive lineman when he wants to be at Jefferson County. So, absolutely with Nick Moore, probably not as much with Antoni, but with Nick Moore, no doubt about it. And again, they've got to figure that out, whether that's Vice and Lang, whether that is, William Satterwhite. They've got to figure out kind of who that 2-3 center combination is going to be, just in case something does happen to Cooper this fall.
Get back to the offensive tackle spot. I mean, of course, Tennessee does not have a commit just yet, but the net has been cast pretty wide in this cycle. Tennessee's in with a number of highly rated prospects at that position. Of course, I mentioned a couple of those names a moment ago. Where is Tennessee at offensive tackle right now, and when could maybe one of those guys jump in the boat?
Well, Jaelyne Matthews is the only one that has a locked-in commitment date, and that's June 3rd. And so, we'll expect him. The rubber's going to meet the road fairly quick for him. Continue to believe Tennessee has done a really nice job there. Miami's certainly continuing to swing. A few and some other schools. David Sanders is going to take his visit. You're looking at probably a July commitment for Big David, unless he feels froggy at the end of June. After that, Tennessee's going to host, Juan Gaston, big offensive tackle out of the state of Georgia. I think Josh Petty will probably take an official visit here. Tennessee saw that, the kid from Babaloa from Kansas he cut Tennessee, so he's going to look elsewhere. But But outside of that, you just kind of focus on those first couple we just talked about.
And then finally, you look at this class now, 10 commits. You're sitting, just outside the, in between 10 and 15 in the national, rankings. And that kind of puts you, 6th or 7th in SEC at current standing. What do you like about this class, and where does Tennessee need to make some strides in order to jump in that top 10 and hopefully in that top 5 in the SEC when it's all said and done?
Well, they've got to continue to add defensive linemen. They got to continue to add offensive tackles. They need to add another running back, one more receiver. We'll see what they do with Deshaun Brame. It's an Oregon-Tennessee battle for him, the tight end. Tennessee has Jack Van Doorslayer already committed. Because you saw the movement at the tight end spot with the kid who moved over to Leo, at the end of spring practice.
Emmanuel Okoye.
Yeah, there we go. Tennessee would potentially take 2. They were only going to take 1, but with Brame's interest, with Okoye moving to defense, I could see them taking 2. If not, you're looking at potentially going to the portal, just to continue to add depth. But, again, I think this is a class that's really solid for it to be top 10, top 5 good. They've got to land the David Sanders. They've got to land Jalen Matthews, Charles House, those top players to get to that top 5-ish range.
It's a shame, though, my Emmanuel Okoye story is never going to run, though, right?
That is correct.
All right, Austin Price, appreciate it as always, man, and we'll have you back on the show here soon.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Eric.
Wouldn't it be great if you could see all of your investment and retirement accounts all in one place? With Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into one hub and access the expert analysis you need to tend to your entire portfolio with confidence. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data that you need all in one place. They're number one in financing in your finance destination, producing a holistic look at financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspective, analysis ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you get on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor. That's yahoofinance.com. The number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. Again, one more time, that is yahoofinance.com. Want to welcome back onto the show here on Locked On Vols, a Thursday edition. Max Chadwick, he is over at Pro Football Focus, and he's been very, very high on Tennessee's own pass rusher, James Pearce, all offseason. We had Max on a couple weeks ago to talk about James Pearce, and we're going to do the same here today. Max, appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
Yeah, Eric, thanks for having me on again, man.
So when you look at James Pearce, you've said that he can go as high as number 1 overall in the NFL draft. You thought that in this past year's NFL draft, he might have been the first defensive player taken. Simply put, why are you so in love with James Pearce and his ability?
Yeah, he's a freaky athlete, right? At 6'5", 242 pounds. He hit 23 miles per hour in our GPS tracking this past season on the pick 6 against Iowa in the bowl game. That was the fastest of any defensive lineman has hit this past year. So freaky athlete. And he's been a dominant pass rusher for Tennessee last year. He had the 3rd best pass rushing grade in the country, 3rd best pressure rate in the country among all edge defenders. And the scariest part about him is that he's pretty much winning exclusively off athleticism right now. There's not a lot of pass rushing moves yet in his bag. So when he does add those moves, he could be nearly unblockable as a pass rusher. So I think the ceiling is still so high for James Pearce Jr., even though he's already the best edge defender in college football right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, how can he get even better and maybe developing some more pass rushing moves? What are your thoughts on him against the run, and what are some other areas to where he can improve his game? If Tennessee's pretty good on the other side of the defensive line, I feel like that can only help James Pearce to go and make more plays and again, kind of boost his outlook for the 2025 NFL draft.
Yeah, you're right. I think that in the adding moves, and then also you mentioned the run, and I think that's probably the one. He's okay against the run. He's not great. He's got to add some strength. He's only 242 pounds, so add a little bit of weight, and that should help him out, hold up better in the run game instead of getting washed out like he was at times last year. So I think those are the two things I'm looking for from him this year: is adding some moves to his bag, and then also getting better against the run, getting a little stronger against the run, and staying a little lower as a pass rusher too. I think he kind of pops up too much sometimes when he's rushing off the edge. If he stays low as a pass rusher, he could even get there to the quarterback even quicker than he was last year, which is crazy to think about, honestly. So yeah, it's still amazing talking about him as a guy who can still grow so much as a player. And like I said, he's already such a dominant pass rusher last year. It's pretty scary to think about what he could become if he does, add all those things we just talked about.
Everybody's talking about, EA Sports College Football 2025 and the excitement there and everything. I mean, I'm excited too. I don't know. I don't have a system anymore because I haven't played video games in about a decade, but maybe I'll buy one. But when we're having this conversation, if you were, doing the player rankings in that game, where would you rank James Pearce of Tennessee? And kind of, I would have to imagine he'd be in the upper echelon of player rankings in that game.
Yeah, he should be. I mean, probably would be one of the top, for me at least, one of the 5 or so highest rated players in the game. And I don't know what their rating system would be. I don't love giving out 99s like it's candy, like they've been doing in the past few years, where they give out like a few 99s. I feel like that should only be reserved for like truly like generational type players. So I would probably give out like a 97, maybe the highest I give out to a player this year. So he would probably be in like 95 to 97 range, I would say. It's one of the 5 or so highest rated players in the league, or in the nation, I should say.
So you have that to look forward to. Hold Max Chadwick to it. If he's not a 97, then let's send the hate email over towards Max Chadwick. But I mean, I assume that he's going to be in the mid to upper 90s. It would only make sense. Who were some of James Pearce's biggest rivals this season coming up? Not only for the 2024 or 2025 NFL draft when you talk about pass rushers, but pass rushers around the country, specifically in the Southeastern Conference. It's James Pearce, and who are some other names that we should be checking the box score to see, okay, TFLs and sacks, where's Pearce rank amongst this group?
Yeah, I think, the number 2 edge defender in the country, for me at least, is also an SEC edge defender, and that's Nick Scorton from Texas A&M, who actually was formerly at Purdue for his first 2 years of college football. Now he's at Texas A&M, transferred this offseason. He was 9th in the Power 5 in pass rush win rate, 3rd most run defense stops too, so much better run defender than Pearce is right now. Powerful edge. He's 6'4", 260, so he's got a little bit more size than Pearce right now. He also has a nasty spin move that he flashes a lot. So he moves pretty well for a player that big too. So Nick Scorton, the new Texas A&M edge defender, is probably the top guy, I would say, in terms of watching out for right now. Then, in the draft, I think another guy that has caught a lot of people's eyes is Abdul Carter from Penn State, who is moving from off-ball linebacker to edge rusher. He's kind of going to remind a lot of people of Micah Parsons, and then he moves from linebacker to edge rusher. Parsons obviously did it in the NFL. Penn State's doing it now in college with Abdul Carter. Like Parsons, he's a freak athlete, and he really flashed some really amazing stuff as a pass rusher from an off-ball linebacker standpoint. So if he could translate to the edge, I mean, he could be a really, really high pick in the draft. And I think there's some other guys too in this draft that you got to watch out for, like Michael Williams from Georgia. A lot of people are big fans of. I still think there's a lot to do with his game before I can, put him in that range. JT Tuimoloau, been really inconsistent in his career at Ohio State, but he's got first-round tools. Jack Sawyer, really, really solid all-around edge defender. He could be a first-round pick. Patrick Payton could be a first-round pick, the Florida State edge defender. Like Pearce, he's got to add a little bit of weight, though, in my opinion. But Princely Iman-Mielen, who went from Florida to Ole Miss, I think he could be a first-round pick as well. It's a really good edge class this year, and I think Pearce is obviously at the top of it right now, but there are certainly a lot of guys right behind him that are going to be first-round potential picks for sure.
Where would you rank Tyler Barron? I'm going to be honest with you, when players leave Tennessee, I don't really pay attention, especially him and Wesley Walker. Feels like they've been committed to about 7 schools since they left Tennessee this one offseason. Can't tell you where he's playing next year. Honestly, don't know. But Tyler Barron, what's your outlook on him? Because he had a really good year for Tennessee, and I think because James Pearce was so effective, a lot of that has to, not a lot, but some of it has to do with Tyler Barron because he had a really good year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's a guy that obviously still waiting on where he's going to go. He had a really busy offseason this year. I mean, he went from Tennessee to, Louisville, and then Tennessee to Ole Miss, and then Ole Miss to Louisville, and now he's back in the portal, right, after that?
Yes.
So, 4 schools in 5 months, whatever, is what he's doing right now, and he still hasn't decided on his next one. I really liked him. I thought, he and James Pearce Jr. were going to be form one of the best pass rushing duos in the or edge duos in the country. And then we went to Ole Miss. I was like, oh, cool. He and Prince Mumielen will form one of the best edge duos in the country. Then he went to Louisville. I'm like, oh my God, him and Ashton Gelati, who I didn't even mention, who's another top 5 edge defender in the country. I was like, man, that would be a great edge duo too. So he seems to always go to a school where he's going to be kind of like the Robin to someone else's Batman. We'll see what school he picks on next, and maybe he'll be the top guy there. But I like him a lot. I think he's probably more of a third or fourth or fifth round pick right now. I don't think he's truly a first or second rounder yet. Mm-hmm. But if he has a big year next year, I think he can certainly get in that range in the second round, at least day 2 range. But I'd say he's probably more of like a day 3 kind of pick right now.
How did you view Byron Young coming out of Tennessee? I know that a lot of people jumped on board when they saw him at this pro day and the combine, and of course he has such an amazing rookie year in the NFL, but kind of in this position, the Tennessee calls it the Leo, where you can step back and drop into pass coverage if you need it, but you get after the quarterback. And Pearce, I think, could take a page out of Byron Young's book, because when he arrived at Tennessee, he was like 225 pounds, and he left at well over 250. Mm-hmm. How did you view Byron Young leaving Tennessee a couple years ago?
I liked him. Obviously he had a good year for the Rams, and I think he's going to be relied on again next year as kind of the guy opposite of Jared Verse, who they just took in the first round of the draft as well. Freak athlete. I mean, he ran a 4.43 in the NFL Combine, which is like unbelievable stuff for an edge defender, especially a 250-pound edge defender, like you said. So I liked him a lot. I really did coming out of Tennessee, and I thought the Rams made a great pick in the 3rd round getting him. I think he's a good pass rusher. I think he could hold up in the run game too, and like you said, you add strength, which is important. And I think Pearce should kind of follow that. No, I think Pearce obviously has a much higher ceiling than Byron Young, but and going to go higher in the draft because of it. But I think Byron Young is a guy that you could look at and say, okay, that's kind of like the mold that we want to get stronger in a lot of ways. And I think Byron Young proved that is possible, and he's making a pretty good NFL career out of it right now.
Back to this current Tennessee 2024 football team coming up, you got James Pearce. Who were some other draft prospects that fans should be tracking this year, not just as some of their favorite players on Tennessee's team, but okay, like if he balls out, maybe he can go from a mid-round to a day 1 or day 2 potentially, or whatever the case is. Because I don't think that there's a clear-cut answer here. There's a lot of guys who will be drafted or guys who will be in NFL camps, but after James Pearce, I don't know if I could tell you who a slam dunk 2nd, 3rd, and 4th prospect is on Tennessee's team.
No, I think you're right. I think one guy that people are pretty high on is John Campbell Jr., the right tackle for Tennessee.
Does age not do anything for that? Because this will be, obviously from Tennessee's perspective, you want him to, be a good draft pick. But I mean, this will be his 7th year in college.
I know. I think that's a big thing too. I was just going to mention that. I think that's a huge thing that people are that might drop him on some boards. But I know I've talked to some people around about the tackle class next year, and they mentioned his name a couple times. So I think he could be a day 3 pick. Chris Brazzell could be a day 3 pick. Brew McCoy could be a day 3 pick. Or even better. I mean, I'm saying right now where I think they are right now. But Javonte Spraggins could be another guy to watch out for. Joshua Josephs, the other edge defender at Tennessee. Maybe Dylan Sampson as Tennessee's running back this year. Holden Stays, Dante Thornton. So there's a lot of guys. I mean, Mari Thomas is a guy to keep an eye on. There's a lot of guys. I like Squirrel White too. I don't know how much of a NFL prospect he'll be, but he's a really, really fun receiver to watch right now. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of guys. I don't think there's not another 1st round or day 2 prospect, I would say, on Tennessee's roster as of right now. That could certainly change. But I do think there are a lot of guys that are, day 3 potential players right now.
Last question I want to throw at you, and kind of on this subject as well. Cooper Mays, he's one name you didn't mention, it wasn't intentional or anything, but he is a center. He'll be a 4-year starter in this league. You think that he's undersized, but when you go and kind of do some research on some true centers who have been drafted the last couple of years, he kind of fits that mold a little bit. What's his outlook, in terms of the NFL draft and being a guy that's experienced in this league, albeit maybe a little bit on the smaller frame size?
Yeah, I've heard a lot about. I've watched him before, and I know people are pretty high on him, but I think he's fine. I think he's a good player. I don't think he's a guy that I'm surely head over heels for in this interior offensive line class right now. I think he's a decent pass blocker. He's a decent run blocker too. I don't think he's a dominant player in either of them. So obviously, the experience is great, and the fact that he's been starting for so long is great, and he's gonna be well versed in a lot of areas. But I never was blown away by his tape, and he's never really graded out that highly either. So I've heard about him before. I've heard a lot of people be high on him before. I personally think he's a good, not great player right now, and that's why I don't think he's much, at least for me, not much of a NFL prospect as of right now.
All right, out the door. Give me a Tennessee football record for 2024. What do you think Tennessee's going to do this year?
Oh man, I gotta remind myself of the schedule again. But I like them this year, man. I think they have some really intriguing stuff with Nico. Obviously at quarterback now. I think he could establish himself as the early favorite to be QB1 in 2026. I'm really excited about him. I think the receiving corps is really, really fun. I obviously Pearce on the defensive side of the ball. Oh man, I gotta look at the schedule, but I feel like a 9-3, 10-2 season is not out of the cards for them. I think they can compete for a playoff spot next year. Yeah, I think Tennessee's gonna be a really, really interesting team to watch next year because of Nico at quarterback and because of Pearce at edge defender. I'm really excited to see what Tennessee the Vols can do next year.
That is kind of right on cue with what everybody's thinking. 9-3, 10-2, and competing for a college football playoff spot for sure. So. Max, I appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for joining us here today. And where can we follow some more of your work?
Yeah, you can follow me on X at Max Chadwick CFB. You can see all my articles over at pff.com. And then also I host the PFF College Football Show, which is on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcast too.
Max Chadwick, Pro Football Focus college football analyst, and as he just mentioned right there, the co-host of the Pro Football Focus College Football Show, joining us here on Locked On Vols. Max, thanks so much, man.
Thanks, Eric.
It is winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL playoffs, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own over there at FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, where you can make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, because where else can you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet? Again, all you have to do is go to FanDuel.com, put in this promo code Locked On. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, it is America's #1 sportsbook, and it's where you can make every moment more over to FanDuel Sportsbook. Okay, so to conclude this Thursday show, had a couple of guests on, and I really appreciate the good stuff, the good words from Max Chadwick, from Austin Price on Tennessee recruiting, development, a look at the 2024 season, and of course, with Max Chadwick's case, a look ahead to the 2025 NFL Draft and James Pearce specifically. But I did want to conclude this Thursday show on a really interesting article that I found over at CBS Sports. So many times you guys will reach out for Twitter Tuesday, mailbag on Volquest so many times and ask specifically, what do NIL values look like for certain position groups? And though sometimes, certainly not all the time, so I don't want to act like I'm, that guy that knows everything or pretends to know everything, because clearly I know some things. I don't know everything in terms of the NIL space. A lot of times, though, when I know how much a certain player is making, it's not my business to put it out there, right? So I have a good idea over certain cases, right? And there's some outliers here. Like I'm going to go through in CBS Sports after talking with a panel of collectives and coaches and all that type of stuff. They kind of put together a map of what positions, the values for NIL deals are for those positions. But there's always outliers, right? I mean, there's a quarterback you really want, you're going to overpay. There's an offensive tackle you really want, you're going to overpay. Sometimes you can get a veteran to stay. Again, it's roster retention, right? Trying to re-recruit your players to stay on your team instead of entering the transfer portal. Sometimes they'll take a team-friendly deal, if you will, to stay. So just because of the areas and the ranges I'm going to read out here, that does not apply to every single player. I think that's important to remember. But as I've said before, it's kind of modeled how you would build a roster in the National Football League, right? I mean, quarterbacks got to get paid. Playmakers on the outside sometimes got to get paid. Defensive backs at times are going to get paid, and pass rushers and offensive tackles are going to get paid, whereas interior offensive linemen, interior defensive linemen, linebackers, safeties, tight ends, running backs. I mean, a lot of times those positions are not ones that are always gaining a whole lot of steam in terms of name, image, and likeness value. So looking at this article over here at CBS Sports, the QB market range, quarterback market range, is anywhere from $500,000 to $800,000. what it says right here. Just like the NFL, quarterback is the most valuable position in college football. There are some notable outliers here, more on them in a second, but the industry agrees that you can get a quality starting power 4 quarterback in the 500,000 to 800,000 range. It's QB1, said a Power 4 collective operator. That's the most important playmaker in your team and the most valuable. During a recent interview with Greg McElroy in the Cole Kubelik Show, Auburn coach Hugh Freeze said he couldn't bring himself to spend $1 million on the transfer quarterback, especially with Peyton Thorne already on the roster. Thorne arrived at Auburn in 2023 after 26 games at Michigan State starter. Freeze's comments invoked speculation and invoked criticism from collective operators frustrated with coaches complaining about the cost of doing business. Listen to this quote. I hate college coaches who talk about NIL and don't want to spend $1 million, said one NIL expert who works at the multiple Power 4 collectives. You don't have to spend $1 million. You can get a great quarterback for less than that if you knew what you were doing. So, again, the range for quarterbacks, according to this article, anywhere from, on average, $500,000 to $800,000. You look at the running back range. It goes anywhere from $200,000 to $300,000. And again, this isn't just for every single player. In fact, I know of a couple of running backs in college football that are not in this range here, so they can be more if you're valued more or less if you're taking a team-friendly deal or whatnot. But running backs, again, as you'd expect, a little lesser value. I think you can get paid more. I think there's higher upside in the college game in terms of how much money you can make than maybe in the NFL, because the NFL running backs are just not valued whatsoever outside of just one or two. Anyway, the running back range is anywhere from $200,000 to $300,000 according to this report. Wide receiver market range. This one's interesting. $75,000 to $300,000. That's quite a big range right there, right? It's a range of $225,000. And I think it makes sense. Remember, you are one player. You are one wide receiver in a system that will deploy either 3 or 4 wide receivers. Okay, so it makes sense not to have one wide receiver make so much money when arguably you're not even touching the ball 4 or 5 times a game, but still there's sometimes those playmakers that can value up towards close or maybe even exceed the $300,000 mark. I think this is kind of spot on here. $75,000 to $300,000, that range there for wide receivers, according to the story at CBS Sports. Offensive line market range. All right. This one's interesting as well, $350,000 to $500,000. And see, I'm interested to know, I wish they would have split this up into tackles, exterior offensive lineman tackles, and then interior offensive linemen, because there's a difference here. Offensive tackles are going to make more. Simply put, they're going to make more because they are charged with blocking and defending the blind side of the quarterback, blocking and defending pass rushers who are paid to go and get after the quarterback. Quick, athletic, strong. It's a very, very important position. I know I'm not breaking any news here. So I would imagine that an offensive tackle's on the high end of this range. And quite frankly, an interior offensive lineman, sometimes if you're getting paid, you might not even breach that $350,000 marker, in my opinion, depending on where you are. This is what it says about this one here from CBS Sports. A high-end left tackle can make more than this range, but similarly, there can be value found at the guard positions. It's interesting position where you need a lot of them, but you also can never have too many offensive linemen, where you don't need a whole lot of them, but you can never have too many. A lot of money is spent on retention to prevent the top offensive linemen from ever hitting the market, which mirrors what typically happens at the next level. So this one's pretty interesting. Offensive line range, $350,000 to $500,000. Go to the defensive line, same thing. I wish they would have said edge rushers, defensive ends, outside line, like edge rushers, and then interior defensive linemen, because this range is $250,000 to $600,000. And I think that's about right. Again, you have guys who go and get after the quarterback and change games. They're game breakers, if you will. Some of the highest paid athletes on Tennessee's roster are edge rushers, and that's the same across the SEC and across college football. It's just where the value in the market is. So this makes a whole lot of sense. Linebackers, $100,000 to $300,000. That's a bit steep, in my opinion, to be completely honest. Unless you're including outside linebackers that can walk up and rush off the edge. This range kind of surprised me a little bit, 100,000 to 300,000. I think that'd be a little steep, but nonetheless, defensive back range. And again, I wish they would have changed this to cornerbacks and safeties instead of just including all DBs. But the range is 120,000 to 225,000. So if you think about the priority that Tennessee did in this transfer portal class, let's just use this last offseason as an example. The value was offensive tackle, got to have one, and I'm sure Lance Hurd was very incentivized to come here to Tennessee. There was an absolute need at tight end, and tight ends and even on this list here. But Tennessee had to have a tight end, so I'm sure that Holton Stays had many reasons to come here to Tennessee because he is a specific outlier in this. Tennessee needed a cornerback. Jamal McCoy, I'm sure, is one of those guys. Whereas a veteran that is coming from a group of 5 up to the Power 5 and Jacoby Thomas, I would imagine you didn't have to incentivize him as much to get him to Tennessee. Just my opinion. Again, I don't know specifics. Some other guys, Jackson Moy, interior defensive line. I would imagine you didn't have to break the bank there. Chris Brazzell, playmaker, wide receiver, probably had to be incentivized to come here to the University of Tennessee. I'm just, it's where you are, right? Name, image, and likeness is absolutely legal right now. And every team in the country is kind of walking through this process. That's why we have, could you imagine 10 years ago, an article at CBS Sports on college football talking about the values and how much these players at what positions are getting paid? It's just crazy how things have changed. So I thought this was really interesting. Hopefully it answers some of your questions. Again, there's outliers in every position group, but the standard, the range, typically quarterbacks, 500,000 to 800,000. Running backs, 200,000 to 300,000. Wide receivers, 75,000 to 300,000. Offensive line range, 350,000 to 500,000. Defensive line market range, 250,000 to 600,000. Linebacker market range, 100,000 to 300,000. And defensive back market range, 120,000 to $225,000. So hopefully that answers some questions on kind of where the values are. I just found that really, really interesting. And it is a wild time in college football right now, that is for sure. Big thanks to Austin Price, VolQuest.com. Big thanks to Max Chadwick of Pro Football Focus. And a big thank you for tuning in here to today's Thursday show. We'll get you set on all the things maybe we might have missed from Wednesday and Thursday. We'll get you caught up on everything from the SEC baseball tournament in Hoover, Alabama. All that and more is coming up on your Friday Locked On Vols, getting you set for the weekend as well. Appreciate you guys as always for making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch each and every single day. Can't thank you enough. Let's do it again tomorrow right here on Locked On Vols.